Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome to another episode of Corpse Club Horror BFFs. I am one of your Horror BFFs, Patrick Bromley, joined as always by my Horror BFF, Heather Wixson.
Hello.
I kind of said BFF.
BFF. Well, it makes sense. Because we're doing this is a little Platinum Dunes, little Sam Bayer.
Well,
BFFs
done.
makes sense.
Horror BFFs this episode. In case you didn't already figure it out, we're talking about the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street because we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of some of 2010's finest horror remakes. We already discussed The Crazies, and now we're getting into A Nightmare on Elm Street.
This kind of lines up also, too, with sort of the actual 10th anniversary
of the film,
of it.
Yeah.
Yes. So, it's interesting because this was actually the first movie I ever did a set visit for.
Well, then it has special meaning for you.
Oh, it does.
And zero meaning for me, except that parts of it were filmed at my high school.
At Elk Grove High School, I know. I was like, of course it was. Like, yeah. Which would have been my high school too, but I moved.
Yes.
Because I was like, I'm getting away from Patrick. I need to get the hell out of here.
Understandable, so but now you missed out on this deep, deep connection, I feel, to the 2010 remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes. I also have another connection in the fact that I'm like one of three people, I want to say, that gave it, and I live with this shame every day, that gave it a somewhat positive review.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a 3 out of 5. So it's not like I was giving it a glowing review, but it barely passed the hump for me in terms of being a bad movie. And we'll get into that, but I know.
Do you remember what it was about it that you're like, this is not bad?
So I think initially, I should really go back and read my review. I was so prepared for this. I think initially for me, like I do think that there are some good things in this movie. I think it has the wrong director, obviously. I think that it backpedals a little bit on some of its ideas. I think there are some good visuals, but like I wish I had like a year, like I watched that movie and then had a year with it, because it's like I see things now where I'm like, I didn't see these things before with some of my issues with it. But I do think that there are some good things to it. I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's not great. And as far as the Platinum Dunes remakes, like it's, on the spectrum of like, something like Texas Chainsaw, or, I'm trying to think of another one that I really liked. Oh my God, I'm totally blanking. Amityville, I think it falls lower towards like the end of the spectrum, down by The Hitcher.
I've never seen The Hitcher.
Let me just tell you. So my favorite thing about The Hitcher is I actually saw it in theaters, and it was like this like sort of dine-in theater. It was called Hollywood Boulevard in like Downers Grove or something
I remember
like that. Yeah, and there was myself, my ex, my cousin, and like another couple was there, and then like maybe 2 other people. And there's like a really crazy gory sequence that happens like towards the end of the movie, and all I remember is like you could just kind of feel like everyone's like whatever with this movie, and then all of a sudden, and I'm gonna have to blow our one F-bomb on this because I just can't censor it, so sorry. But I really remember like there's like this big glorious death, and the guy like sitting there was like, "That's how you kill a motherfucker," and I was like the whole like all of us started laughing, and at that point like we were like, all right, whatever. We all know we're in like a really ridiculous situation now, and this is what we're doing. It's not great. I just remember kind of rolling my eyes a lot during it. I don't think you're missing too much. If you're ever like super duper bored and it's literally the last thing for you to watch, feel free to pop it in.
So, gun to your head, are you watching that or A Nightmare on Elm Street?
Oh, I would probably watch the Nightmare movie because ultimately it's still Freddy. Okay, look, I was really excited for this movie when it was announced. I'm not, other than Point Break, I've never really been super precious about remakes. And I don't know why Point Break was like, no, we're not remaking Point Break. But like Nightmare, I wasn't really opposed to. I think it's also because Robert Englund at that point had sort of embraced it, where he was kind of coming out and saying like, yeah, I'm okay with this. Like, and of course, Jackie Earle Haley, who is a fantastic actor, was just coming off of Little Children and Watchmen, and coming into this. And I was like, okay, there's something, they've got a really great caliber actor coming in as Freddy. I still have like a little Mezco Freddy doll on my little Freddy shelf from the remake because I bought it before the movie came out. I would have bought it after the movie, but I was like, well, I need a new Freddy. But yeah, I was really, really excited. I love Sam Bayer's music video work. I mean, you can't argue that he hasn't done some of the most influential videos from the 90s and the early 2000s, because he has. If there's a music video you love from the 90s, chances are he probably directed it. And I just thought he would have a really interesting visual style. I just don't know what went wrong, other than the fact that he obviously saw things a lot differently than, you know, the guys at Platinum Dunes. I know that they kind of clashed a bit. I can also tell you from the set visit, which was really interesting for me because, again, it was my first one. I remember we were walking through, and they were actually filming the finale, which isn't the finale that's in the movie, which I'll talk about. And they gave us like 5 minutes with Sam Bayer. And he walked up, and one of the first things he said, and I remember I was standing next to Stacey Wilson, and we both looked at each other like in horror when he said this. And he basically said that there had never been a good Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Oh boy.
And we both looked at each other. We were like, what? And I didn't put that in my set visit report because I was like, well, that's not going to do anybody any favors. And he just said basically like one was okay. And from there, they just got worse. And I was like, oh, my God, what is going on? And I think if he'd been more into it, because like Platinum Dunes had been chasing him to do movies for years. Like he was actually one of their first choices to do the Texas Chainsaw movie, and he turned it down. They wanted him to come in for Friday. They turned it down, or he turned it down. And so I think he finally was like, whatever, fine, I'll do a Nightmare on Elm Street. I think if he had really been into it and really understood that it needs to be more than the imagery, that he could have made something pretty solid. But there's like this weird disconnect that happened. And I don't know at what point it happened, but it's a bummer because there is some good stuff in there. I love the introduction of micronaps. I think there's something pretty clever about that because I'd never seen that in a Nightmare movie before. And I do think Eric Heiser is probably one of the best, writers working out there. I mean, this was obviously a lot earlier in his career, but he's gone on to do, like the Exorcist TV series. He did Arrival. It's such a weird mix of everything where like it should have worked better than it did.
It's like a nothing of a movie. It's not even that it's so aggressively terrible that you can't stop thinking about it or talking about it. But I can't find anything in it to like. And I feel like had they hired Samuel Bayer to do Friday the 13th or Texas Chainsaw, I feel like he could have messed those up less. Because I think his Texas Chainsaw would have been interesting, to be honest. I mean, I love the Texas Chainsaw remake and I'm good with it, but I think his could have been interesting because there's a sort of that grittiness that was very much his visual style. I just don't think he has any point of view on A Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I don't think, hiring a music video guy to do A Nightmare on Elm Street in theory makes sense because you're thinking, Erica and I just rewatched The Cell the other night, the Tarsem Singh movie.
Yes.
Right. And that's what comes to mind when you think like, hey, we hired this music video guy to remake A Nightmare on Elm Street. You're like, oh, there's going to be spectacular, imaginative visual dream sequences. And instead we get like sort of imitation Wes Craven done poorly. I mean, there's no visual invention in this movie the way there. And listen, I'll say, the original Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite horror movie of all time. I'm not bringing, for the most part, that baggage into this remake. I'm not just doing a side-by-side comparison the entire time. I'm trying very hard to look at Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy as his own Freddy and not as a comparison to Robert Englund. The only times where I'm forced to draw comparisons is when the movie deliberately forces me to do that by slavishly recreating an iconic moment from the original film and consistently doing it worse. I mean, look at the Freddy pushing through the wall very early on.
Oh my God, that is my least favorite moment of the entire movie. Like, why?
Who could choose?
I mean, if you're going to do that moment, and I get it, you want to do that moment, but like they did it practically in 84
right.
And it's still iconic. There was no reason to do it digitally. There wasn't. There really was no reason whatsoever. And it's a bummer.
It looks like the Stephen Sommers mummy coming through the wall.
It does, yes. Like when the mummy's in like the sands and it's all like, "Rawr, I'm gonna eat you." Yeah, I think that's the thing for me. I think the movie, the stuff that I do appreciate about the movie is when it isn't redoing the original Nightmare. I think it's interesting because like I think we get a tease of that, and I think it actually works kind of well when Nancy goes and takes a bath, because, you know, we had to get the bathtub scene in there. And of course the claw comes up, but yet it's not the same moment. Like all of a sudden then it flips, and then it goes into her being at the preschool.
Right.
And for me, I was like, they should, like, I understand you want to get some of those iconic shots in there, and that's fine. That's okay. That's fine. But it needed more of that, because like with Chris's death, like just tossing her around the room like that, it's not as terrifying as when Amanda Wyss is literally in a rotating room being dragged around.
Right.
It looks almost cartoonish. And I think for me, one of the biggest issues with it I have is the fact that nothing in this movie has time to breathe. There is no sense of tension. It's just go, 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 go.
And yet it's so boring.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it boring. I just would call it kind of okay. But like, it's just, it has no time to build. There's no sense of anything between the characters. Did you know that Nancy's mom's a doctor?
Sure.
Right? Like that's apparently like her character name is, let me see. Let me find if I can find it here really quick. It is Dr. Gwen Holbrook.
Yeah.
What?
We changed the last name to Holbrook, so it's better.
But like, she's a doctor. Like, since when?
Right.
And if she's a doctor,
instead of an alcoholic.
Yeah, but I mean, even that, like, if she's a doctor and Nancy has to go to the hospital, like, wouldn't she already be there? Like, what kind of doctor is she? There's no sense of character, and it kind of bums me out, because I think I really like the cast. I really like Kyle Gallner. I like Rooney Mara. I like Katie Cassidy. I like Thomas Dekker. And I actually, you know, for better or for worse, I'm fine with Kellen Lutz. Like, you know, I never saw the Twilight movies.
Kellen Lutz is what happens when you give a social security number to a roast beef sandwich.
That sounds delicious, though. No, I mean, I never watched the Twilight movies because I actually missed out on it. But he was fun in the Expendables movie, and he was actually fun in something. He was fun in something else that I saw.
He's done a couple of like direct-to-video action movies that he's not terrible in, and this movie has the good sense to kill him off very quickly. My problem with the cast in this movie, and I will be the first to admit, I don't get Kyle Gallner.
I love Kyle Gallner.
And that's fine. I don't get it. But all of the male characters are sort of the same. I mean, it's basically Kyle Gallner and Thomas Dekker, who are basically the same brooding teen.
Well, everybody's a brooding teen in this.
Everyone is the same. They're completely interchangeable. There's nothing about Nancy that sets her apart from Chris or any of the male characters. There's nothing about, you know, Rooney Mara, I think, is openly miserable in this movie, and I think has even said as much in the press subsequently.
Can I give you some gossip about that?
You please feel free.
Okay, so because I used to work at an effects house, I used to work at Almost Human, and my boss was really good friends with Thomas Dekker because he used to do the Sarah Connor Chronicles. So
which was a great show, by the way.
It was, and if you have never seen it, it's actually pretty fun. And it's got a lot of really good stuff with Lena Headey and Thomas Dekker. So I actually got to see them all quite a bit because they used to hang out at the shop a lot.
That's awesome.
And so Thomas, when he came back from Nightmare on Elm Street, he was sharing like all these horror stories, because Sam Bayer was actually depriving his cast of sleep because he wanted them to really be authentic to the sort of psychosis of like not sleeping and stuff like that.
That's so being a good director.
It is. It's being thorough. So he would actually have the hotels call their rooms like on the hour so that they couldn't sleep.
What an idiot.
Yeah. So those poor kids were being tortured on that movie. He was calling them like I don't know if it was everyone's like at least every 2 hours. So like they would just start to like fall asleep, and no, they would wake up because their phone would start ringing.
Is he English? Samuel Bayer?
I want to. No, I think he's American. He was born in New York.
Okay, then there goes my sweet Samuel Bayer impression.
Oh, okay. You had one working up. But yeah,
I just want to imagine him being British. I think I figured out this directing thing.
That's Sam Bayer now. He's gonna listen to this and he's like, "I'm coming for you, Patrick Bromley."
I hope he listens to this. God damn it.
Blimey. But yeah, so he really like tortured those kids, and I think that's part of the reason I think there's like this sort of disconnect in their performances, because he never trusted his cast enough to find characters. I mean, there wasn't characters to find, but I feel like if those kids would have been able to sort of like come together and like, because they're all really good actors. I actually really like Gallner because of Veronica Mars, and I liked Haunting in Connecticut. And also one of my favorite parts of getting to do the set visit was we were watching a scene and Gallner was standing behind us, and I'm a really big Dan Deacon fan. And there's like this thing with like drinking out of cups. Who put this chair? It's not my chair, not my chair, not my problem. Somebody out there is going to understand that reference.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
It's like this whole thing. Like if you look up Dan Deacon drinking out of cups, it's like this like weird hipster thing that I love. And so we were standing there, and like there was a chair like right behind us press people, and Gallner was standing there, and all of a sudden he was like, "Who put this chair? Not my chair, not my problem." And I like started laughing because I got it. Nobody else in the group got it. And then we started talking because I was like, "Oh, you like Dan Deacon?" He's like, "Oh yeah, he's awesome." And so we just started gabbing about it. So I actually really like Gallner, and I actually like Haunting in Connecticut, and I think my connection to him is because of Veronica Mars.
I watched Veronica Mars. I like Veronica Mars. I don't. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this isn't his finest work, I don't think. But I like that kid. I don't know. I was okay with him.
Yeah.
He kind of became like sort of the it horror kid for a while. But yeah, that was like my big thing is like when you, even in the first moments of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, like we get a sense of Nancy and Glenn and Tina and Rod, like, even though there's like a little friction with Rod, a little Rod friction for you, like you still get a sense that they know each other. And I understand like part of the thing of this movie is like these kids have been through trauma that they've suppressed. So there isn't that emotional connection, which sort of makes sense. But like, even though you don't know that you went to preschool together when you were 5, but you've obviously gone through school together, like are all the kids sort of emotionally disconnected from each other? Like I don't feel like they sort of looked into that enough. And I don't like the fact that, I thought it was interesting that for a while they were like, oh, maybe Freddy didn't do these things. And I kind of wish they'd stayed with that. And that this was sort of like this rage demon who was trying to right some wrongs because some stupid little kids said things that weren't right. I wish they would have stuck to that, because it feels like halfway through the finale, they sort of backpedaled and realized, no, he did these things. Like, it doesn't make sense to me, like narratively.
Well, it's the movie's one major invention, right? And it's something that's borrowed from an Elm Street sequel, because it's kind of a Mandela effect thing that we all remember Freddy as being a pedophile in the original movie, and he's not. He's referred to as a child murderer,
yeah.
Right? But no, it's never sexual abuse is never talked about. But somebody remembered that, later on in the sequels that he was branded a pedophile, and so it's like, well, let's make him one of those. And so it wants to sort of be a movie about abuse and about the specter of the abuser still hanging over us and haunting us, and having to confront that memory and or that abuser, literally. And if I'm being generous, I will give it credit for attempting to be about something. I think it fails in its execution, and I think in doing so, it becomes sort of exploitative and icky.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't, like it kind of wavers back and forth. And I think the introduction of the kids, of them saying, well, like, no, obviously, like when Nancy says, like, we said things that didn't happen. I was like, well, how did you come to that conclusion? You don't even remember. Like, why are you saying that? Because you don't, like, there's just, it's like the movie sort of switches up what it wants to say about abuse,
Right.
like 3 or 4 different times. And to me, that's frustrating because I do think that, you know, in terms, if you want to talk about him being sort of this harbinger of trauma, how, you know, basically drains you of your life and things like that. Like, I can respect that. But the fact that it becomes so wishy-washy about it several times in the movie is really frustrating. It is. You know, it's one of those where you're like, you can just tell at some point somebody went back in for rewrites and was like, no, we're going to go back to this. Like, it was just like, you could almost like see, like, you could almost feel the ping pong effect with the script. And I know the script went through a ton of rewrites because the opening scene at the diner was a reshoot. The finale is like 6 finales. It's not even the finale that I saw shot. And the stuff that I saw being shot was actually really cool, which is sort of a bummer because the scene that I saw being shot was Nancy and Quentin sitting in the room. Yeah, well, it's you know, it's millennial names. What do you want? You know, but like they're sitting in the room and I forget which music video it is that he did this, but like this effect where like somebody's head was being unzipped and like something else comes out. And that was actually what happened was like Nancy's in the room and Quentin's asleep on a chair and she's trying to wake him up. And all of a sudden he unzips himself and Freddy comes out. And that was kind of cool. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, oh, we're doing some fun things here. Okay. And that's not in the movie. It goes back to this like weird thing where like, you don't know who's sleeping, like her pulling him out of the dream. It's so frustrating because there are things that lead you to believe that there could have been good stuff in this movie. And again, you know how much, like, you know, that's the reason we bonded was because of Nightmare on Elm Street movies, like 20, 30 something years ago. And I really wasn't opposed to them doing this, but like, it's just weird to me. Like these decisions that like, I don't know if it was Bayer's hands were tied by Platinum Dunes. I don't know if Platinum Dunes was just frustrated with Bayer, like, but why would you like chase this guy for like 8 years to get a movie and then not give him some freedom at the very least? Like, even if he doesn't like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, at least let him do what he does because visually he's done some really amazing stuff, you know, and just kind of see it neutered a little bit is kind of a bummer.
So you think it's the producers who are to blame for the movie's kind of failures? I think it's
everybody. I mean, other than the writers, I think it comes down to the producers had a vision, the director had a vision, and I don't think they ever got on the same page. It doesn't feel like it.
What is the director's vision?
I mean, I really do think that he wanted to make Freddy scary again. He didn't want the wisecracking Freddy, and then Freddy
wisecracks this entire movie.
Not entirely. It mostly comes up in the third act, I feel like, because he doesn't really talk too much. Like we get a little bit with Chris and a little bit with Jesse, but he doesn't really start wisecracking until towards like the latter half of the movie. Which again, I feel like they were like, oh, we're going to do this series, and then like, we got to throw some one-liners in there, you know. And of course, I roll my eyes when he's like, I'm your boyfriend now. I was like, he's not even his boyfriend.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. It's like because they remember certain things, so they want to do this greatest hits, and it's the same thing that we complained about with Friday the 13th, where it's like they just cherry pick all these moments from the entire franchise because we get I'm your boyfriend now, and they twist themselves in knots to try to build up to that moment. By having it be like your boyfriend's not going to save you, referring to Kyle Gallner as her boyfriend who's not her boyfriend, or the sequence where Nancy is running down the hallway.
Literally zero sexual chemistry with those. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The sequence where Nancy's running down the hallway and they redo the famous running up the stairs from the original film where her feet start sinking into the stairs and it's kind of like a weird gelatinous goo. Here it's a hallway and it, turns into just a big river of goo that she falls in. And Freddy says, talk about a wet dream, which is, of course, a reference from part 4.
Yes.
And he says it to a male character.
Joey. Yeah.
Do women have wet dreams?
I don't think so.
I was always under the impression. I don't mean to sound ignorant. I was under the impression that was specifically a male phenomenon.
Yeah, it's like it's been a long time since I've been in health class.
Right. We're both just failing right now.
But I know I don't remember ever having one. I don't know. Maybe I'm a weird kid. Maybe somebody out there will be like, no, girls have them. I'm like, all right, what do I know?
And maybe it's just a catch-all term for any sex dream. I have no idea, but I thought it referred to a specific phenomenon that happened with adolescent boys. And so it makes sense when he says it to Joey, especially because it's coming on the heels of a sexual fantasy. For it to happen as she falls into the goo in the hall, it's just meaningless. It's just, hey, remember that other Nightmare on Elm Street movie?
Yeah. Like, if they would have cut the wet dream part, I actually did like Nancy going into the river of blood in the hallway. Yeah, because it does make a really cool visual. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and then again, that's the end of it just the reference to Glenn's death, where she kind of comes. They do Glenn's death in reverse, where she comes through the ceiling.
Yeah, and you can get the pool of the blood in the ceiling,
right?
And then ultimately she pulls Freddy through the bed to take him into reality. So again, those are the things where I'm like, okay, so you obviously wanted to do things that were sort of reminiscent, but you didn't want to just do the same thing over, and like that I can respect. Do I think it all comes together in a satisfying way? Not really. And I say this as somebody who really likes Jackie Earle Haley's work, but I just feel like I don't know if the makeup process was just too much for him on this. He just feels irritated throughout the whole movie. And not like in an antagonist sort of way. He's very muted, which is how I would describe every performance in this movie. Everyone feels very, very muted. Like held back. Yeah, no one is really. I don't know if it, bored is probably too strong a word, although I would argue that there are times where Rooney Mara in particular seems bored. But, Jackie Earle Haley is kind of stuck in this limbo between being scary Freddy and wisecracking Freddy. And his wisecracks don't seem like he's having very much fun with them. And his scary Freddy... And you know what's weird? Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, and also just for reference, I really don't like Freddy dropping F-bombs. Is that weird? No, it felt very strange. Yeah. I feel like the character sort of is above that. Like Freddy is beyond needing to rely on F-bombs. Like I say the time because I swear like a sailor and I have no class. But Freddy has like a certain sense of class, I guess, is sort of my thing. I don't know. Like maybe if he had done it, it would less weird, but I just don't. It just felt weird. Yeah. Like, I don't know. It's like, it'd be like having a conversation with my mom who doesn't like really, and then all of a sudden she starts swearing out of the blue. Like, it just feels weird. Like, I'm okay with taunts, but like, I don't know, swearing just feels crazy to me. And I don't think it does Jackie Earle Haley's version of Freddy any favors, which I did. But I also was like, so if they're going to make this Freddy a child molester, and poor Jackie Earle Haley also plays a child molester in Little Children. Right. Like, how easy do you think it is for Jackie Earle Haley to go get dates? Like, this poor guy is like, has now basically been typecast as like this sort of deviant. And he's a really nice guy. Like, it's kind of hard to sort of take that. Like, I just, after Little Children, it was kind of like, oh, he's kind of icky, It's a really good character and a really good performance. And a lot of sweaty, weird Patrick Wilson sex in that movie, which feels very odd. Please, but like, it's Kate Winslet sex. Yeah, that's true. Sorry. I didn't mean to exclude. Tomato. Yeah. But yeah, it was just like, oh, so now he's just kind of like, because like I was, because one thing I remember is like the producer's like, oh, we really liked him in Little Children. I was like, so because he was a good child molester in that movie, you're like, he'll be a great child molester in this movie. And it's a bummer. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not opposed to his casting. I don't love the makeup, but I don't. Well, the digital does that makeup no favor. I'm okay with the fact that they wanted to go with a realistic burn, but here's the thing: that even though you want to go realistic, and I don't understand why Andrew Clement didn't realize this, because he's a fantastic effects guy. You still need to have some sort of highlights and lowlights to that makeup to make it be make it stand out on film. You know what I mean? Like there still needs to be something to make it pop, because regardless of, and this is something that any effects person will tell you, because lighting will affect the way your makeup looks. The types of lenses you use will make your makeup look a certain way. And I really think that I appreciate that he went a natural look. I appreciate that it's very realistic to what real burn victims look like. But he needed to have some more pinks and reds in there, because that's why Freddy Krueger in the original Nightmare on Elm Street movies always pops on screen, because there is sort of that difference of coloring. And here it's just all really brown and gnarly. And it never allows that makeup to really come through in any sort of like striking way, which is a bummer. And the CGI does it no favors.
The CGI is pretty terrible across the board. I mean, we already referenced the Stephen Sommers mummy coming through the wall, but the last shot, when your last shot of a movie is garbage, you're sending people out of the theater remembering that this was garbage. And the final scare, I mean, to be fair, the last shot in the Wes Craven Nightmare on Elm Street is also the worst shot in the movie.
with the blow up doll going through the window of the door.
Going through the door.
Blow up doll Marge.
But the CG in that last shot is so egregious that again,
it almost feels like they were trying to go for 3D, but they didn't know it. Like it was weird, right? Like how it just kind of comes at you. Like just feels like a cheap 3D movie shot.
Yes, it's terrible. And again, my objection to the Jackie Earle Haley Freddy is just nobody has a point of view on the character. He doesn't seem to have a point of view on the character. Samuel Bayer doesn't have a point of view on the character. The producers or the writers don't seem to have a point of view on the character. It's like, I don't know, he's Freddy, he's burned.
Yeah, and I think for me also, like some of the stuff that they brought up sort of reminded me, and and again, I might be misremembering this, and I should have gone back and read my piece, but it also sort of harkens back to some of the stuff that we saw in the first season of Freddy's Nightmares, where he has a trial in the opening, which was, of course, directed by
Tobe Hooper.
Yes, but I think I remember there was an episode with the twins who testified at his trial where they think that they might have misremembered things. I could totally be making that up right now.
No,
I don't remember, because I'm actually going to dive into season 2, because I figured, well, why not? I did season 1. I might as well do season 2 now that we have all this free time.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay. So in some ways I was like, was somebody a Freddy's Nightmares fan? Because that's kind of interesting to me. And yet, like, it just squanders that. Like, it just, bleh. Like, it just vomits out like nothingness at certain points. And yeah, I just like, and also, would you send like a teenage kid into a regular jail?
Yes, of course.
Like with like a dude who's like in his 40s and he's
right.
Like, shut up. Would you, because I'm guessing they're like around 17-ish, maybe they're 18 and maybe that's why he gets to go to prison. So maybe that's not the little minor detail to focus on, but like, it just felt weird to throw this high school kid in jail with like regular people. But I guess they did it with Rod, but Rod was by himself.
And does it make that moment better to have another character there to witness it? Like, why that inclusion?
Yeah. Like, for shock value, maybe? I don't know. Because they couldn't figure out a clever way to get Nancy to see Jesse in this version. Like, I guess it's better that it wasn't like a dream sequence where Nancy ends up in a jail and she's watching as Jesse's getting killed. Because then again, it's just sort of a riff on the first movie. Oh, I don't know. It sucks because, like, I mean, I can still remember, like, going into the premiere, like, because I saw it at the Chinese theater. I still have my Freddy bucket from the premiere, which was really cool because they gave us a bucket of popcorn and it has a little pop-up Freddy glove coming out of it. And I was like, yes, I'm here. I'm ready for Nightmare on Elm Street. And I walked out with mixed emotions, but I think ultimately I was just still really happy to see Freddy on screen. And I was like, okay, well, if they didn't quite get it right this time, like, the movie made a crap ton of money. Like, they could have course corrected with the next one.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know why they didn't do with like what they did with Ouija, with the Ouija movie, where like the first Ouija movie is pretty awful, but then Mike Flanagan comes in for the sequel and makes it really good.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, all right, cool. We are on track. Like, they could have course corrected for a sequel, and they didn't. And I don't understand, because like that movie made more money than any of the the original Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which is so mind-blowingly sad.
It is.
Like, when you think about it,
tremendously depressing.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I know there's like all these like rights issues, and I think Wes Craven's estate now got the rights back, because I think the rights like expired or something, and they went back. They've defaulted back to his estate. So I don't know. Like, I just, I mean, I'm not clamoring for more of this version of Freddy, obviously. But I feel like they could have just sort of been like, okay, well, that didn't work for fans. Let's course correct and take this into a new direction then. And the fact that they didn't, and here we are 10 years later, kind of bums me out. I will be honest. I love Robert as Freddy. We have a very special picture with us with Freddy as Freddy.
Yeah, we do.
Which is amazing. And I will always say Robert is the best Freddy, but I'm not opposed to somebody else being that character in the future. We had like 7 different Jasons. You know what I mean? Like,
right,
and I understand
right.
Jason's different because he doesn't talk and it's just a physical performance. But I'm okay with somebody else taking up that mantle. I wish, I don't know. There's just something that just didn't come together on this one, where it just feels like everybody is really stressed out, and it could have just been the pressure of trying to deliver a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and not being able to do it the way that they wanted to. But they had 2 years to develop it before they started shooting. So I don't get it. It sort of blows my mind a little bit. Like, I can at least say with the Friday the 13th remake, which I don't really love, but I don't dislike it, but I don't love it. But like, at least there's something there that makes you feel like they appreciated Friday the 13th movies, where this doesn't feel like they really give a shit about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
They obviously didn't, given what Samuel Bayer said to you. Nobody involved in the making of this movie made any choices.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately, I think, true of a lot of the Platinum Dunes remakes, is that people don't really make choices. And it's not as egregious on something like Friday the 13th, as long as you have Jason murdering young people. That's going to feel like a Friday the 13th movie. But a Nightmare on Elm Street movie requires some choices to be made. It requires a vision. And either, as you said, that vision was compromised or muted, or just nobody came with any real sense of what they were going to add to this, because it's just a nothing of a movie. Is there a Friday the 13th? Is there a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that you would rank below this? I don't. No, this side does not give me confidence. Okay, good.
I mean, and I know there's people who love it, and that's fine. I really don't like Freddy's Dead. I think Freddy's Dead has some interesting things about it. But I think that movie is a hot mess. And I think Rachel Talalay, it makes a really good effort, but I think her best work is ahead of her, beyond Freddy's Dead, to be really honest.
By which you mean Tank Girl.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, I probably would still watch Freddy's Dead before this. For me, like, the nightmare movies are like the Halloween movies, even the ones that aren't very strong. Like, I still appreciate them, and and I'm glad they exist. And again, I'm not saying I'm glad this exists, but I don't know. Yeah, I think I would still watch Freddy's Dead before this.
Yeah, no, I would too, if for no other reason than because Robert Englund at least seems to be enjoying himself in the making of that movie. So does Rachel Talalay, I think. I don't like that movie. I'm with you. I'm not a Freddy's Dead fan, but she seems to be having fun making it. Robert Englund seems to be having a blast being in it. And so even if I'm not enjoying myself, somebody is, whereas the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, right, no one with the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street is enjoying themselves. Not the people making the movie, not me watching the movie. Everyone is miserable. Yeah,
and it's interesting to me, too, when you look at, like, sort of the Platinum Dunes lineup of films, like, this kind of derailed them for a few years. Like, because it was this, and then the next thing they did that they did with The Purge. Like they took a few years off. I think I think this movie messed up a lot of people. But when you look at the movies that they remade, you Texas Chainsaw, Amityville, Hitcher, The Unborn, and Friday 13th, and then Nightmare. Nightmare's definitely on the bottom end of that spectrum. But I do think like when you look at like Amityville, there are choices that were made in that movie. Texas Chainsaw, there were choices that were made in that movie. Friday 13th, for better or for worse, there were choices that were made. This is just like, here's what we think a Nightmare on Elm Street movie is, but it really isn't. Like, I know. If I could go back, I probably would definitely take my rating down. I mean, at least if I go to a 2.5 and I'm not being super mean, like then I can go to the rotten, like instead of being the fresh tomato, I could be the rotten tomato on Rotten Tomatoes. But I will tell you that review really messed me up because it made me question who I was as somebody who could review movies, because I got quite a few emails from people,
really,
and quite a few comments, because it was obviously for a different website, not Daily Dead. And I genuinely went into that movie wanting to be excited, and maybe a little that caught up with me. But I actually, the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, that wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst movie I've seen, and I still don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen.
No,
I've seen worse, you know. But it just. That was a really tough one for me because I just moved out to LA. Like I was just settling into my career, and I'm basically getting people telling me to go F myself. And like, you should stop writing about movies because clearly you don't know what you're doing. People that were sort of my peers kind of made fun of me for my Nightmare review. And I won't mention names, but it was a real bummer, I'd like a redo. I think I want more Nightmare on Elm Street. I want that. I know Robert Englund has said that he would love to see Kevin Bacon take on that role, and that to me really intrigues me. I don't know. Who would you cast as a new Freddy?
Oh gosh, I've never thought about it at all. I mean, obviously Kevin Bacon is a really interesting idea, but I've never given it any thought because to me it's never been anybody but Robert Englund.
No, I know, but I mean, it's like ultimately, it was, he's not going to live forever. And I think if they made a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie, he wouldn't be Freddy. He would probably, if worst came worst, like come in for a cameo.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think, I think Robert still would want to be a part of that. But yeah, I think for me, like my biggest fear would be like, I'm probably get hate for this, but like my biggest fear is like they would do something really safe and generic and go with like James McAvoy or an actor like that.
Okay.
I don't really like James McAvoy that much. Like,
I do.
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't like him in It Chapter 2 very much. I feel like
he was not the best part of that movie.
That would be the go-to actor, I think. No, he was not Bill to me at all.
Yeah.
So, but I was thinking about that. I was like, what would I do if I was like, came back for another Nightmare, and like, how would I bring it back? And like, what actor would I want? I mean, I do like the idea of Kevin Bacon. I think that'd be freaking cool. Because obviously, he can be scary. We've seen it in Hollow Man. We saw it in Stir of Echoes. I'd like to see more of that Kevin Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, I just how you sort of destroy an entire franchise, and like they were gonna come back like 3 of these movies. Like there were contracts for 3 movies, and this just went so wrong that they were like, well, we're out. And then Platinum Dunes is like, all right, we're just gonna go and make a movie in 3 years, and we're gonna start over. I mean, I know they came back and did Teenage Ninja Turtles, but right. That doesn't quite feel the same.
Well, it kind of got them off the remake train, which I'm not upset about. And Samuel Bayer has literally never directed another movie.
No, he's not. He's gone back to doing videos and commercials, stuff like that, and that's fine. I think short form storytelling suits him. But like, and that's the thing. If people want to hate on Sam Bayer for this movie, and believe me, he was a total jerk at that visit, and I'm okay with it. And I don't even think he went to the last day for the movie because I think that they were at such odds through the whole post-production of this movie that I don't think he was even part of it. But like, can't tell me that he hasn't had an influential career. Like, he did Smells Like Teen Spirit. Like, you can't argue that that video didn't change music videos.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a bummer because it just feels like they just wanted this hot video director, but then they gave him nowhere to do anything that he could have possibly. And it just feels like everybody's sort of in handcuffs in this movie and nobody's allowed any sort of freedom. And when you think of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, that movie is creative freedom on a plate.
Yes.
Like, that is Wes Craven coming up with this really interesting concept and just running wild with it in a way that we hadn't been seeing in the genre at the time. And like, genre.
I heard you go Trebek there.
Yes, genre. So yeah, it's a bummer all around. I didn't want to hate the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. I wanted to love it. And now I'm just kind of like, all right. You know, because I had watched part of it like a few years ago on AMC during like Fear Fest. I was like, oh, okay. But like when I really sat down and watched it twice in the middle of the night, and I was like, okay, yeah. Like everything was just off. It was just kind of a bummer. So, and it makes me sad. I wanted it to succeed. I wish we were like knee deep in new Nightmare movies. I really do.
That would be great. And getting, different
Nightmare movies,
right. Well, or just, getting different directors on board, having different interpretations and different iterations, the same way that they did the original series. I think they could have relaunched. Unfortunately, they just would have been trying to build an entire franchise on poison ground because this movie gives them really nothing to build on.
Yeah, I would have totally scrapped it and just gone, if you have to make, like, again, like Ouija Origin of Evil, I would have just like made little references to the first movie, but really built a whole new story the way Flanagan does for the Ouija sequel. Yeah. For me personally, what I would love, because Shudder has become our sort of savior over the years in terms of preserving these things that we love, I would love to have them bring back Freddy's Nightmares.
That would be awesome.
For a 6-episode run and just really... Like, I was actually thinking about it. I was like, oh, man, somebody should bring back Freddy's Nightmares. Call me, Shudder. Let's do this. Because I think, like, these days, especially, like, you could definitely do the makeup a lot easier. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting ground to sort of cover these days, especially how much things have changed. Like, if you think about it, like how much technology has changed since we really had the last like real Freddy Krueger movie. Like, if we're skipping this and going back to the original franchise, like think about how much things have changed since since New Nightmare. And New Nightmare was kind of like on the cusp of like cutting edge ideas. So it's like, I don't know, there's all kinds of potential for really cool stuff. So anyways, what I'm saying is, Shudder, let's do Freddy's Nightmares. Let's just do it.
I like it.
I love it.
Because of we've been kind of plagued by technical problems for most of this episode, we're going to wrap up there. Anything else about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake you want to say before we call it?
I will say that Michael Bay really puts on some good he gives good set visits, because I had just moved to LA and I was like, oh, I get a free trip home to Chicago. And I'd never been on one before. And when I got there, I was staying at the W Hotel downtown, which was pretty rad. And we had a $250 per day per diem.
Holy cow.
Which I was like, right? I was like, oh my God. So I remember I invited my friends to come out, and we went into the bar and drank absinthe till 3 a.m. And then my friend Cully came upstairs and we were hanging out watching Adult Swim till like 6 a.m. And we ordered middle of the night milkshakes and omelets. So yeah, I was like, wow, Michael Bay really knows how to put on a set visit.
Thank you, Michael
But
Bay.
no, it was pretty cool. Right? Yeah. But no, it was really cool because I actually got to put on the glove, which was kind of nifty. They had two sets of set visits, and the one before us got to all take a picture with the glove on, and we didn't. And I was like kind of bummed about that. But yeah, I mean, I'm willing to take the heat for me not completely hating this movie and wanting to find the best in it, but there's very little of the best to find. So,
yeah, I would have happily found the good in it if I felt that there was any good to find.
I know.
I had a hard time finding any good in it, but it's not for lack of trying. But anyway,
no, I will say
go ahead.
more snow would have been nice also, too.
Yes.
We need more snow in horror. And that's what I'll say about that.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for listening. As always, go to corpseclub.com and find out how you too can become a member of the Corpse Club. Go to dailydead.com for all your daily horror needs. Thank you to our engineer, Brian, especially with this episode because he's got his work cut out for him.
Oh, God.
And on behalf of my Horror BFF, thank you for listening. Until next time, guys, stay scary.